is with me now. And so, have you, as a conservative Republican, have you held your nose and voted Democrat today, Matt?
Yes, I have. I voted.
How did it feel?
It felt surprisingly good. It was weird. I've never voted in a Democratic primary before. First time for everything. But it felt good because I'm confident that this was the right move. As a conservative, it was the right move.
Why did you do it?
Well, look, I think that the worst possible scenario is we get to November and you have Donald Trump, who's a right-wing nationalist, against Bernie Sanders, a socialist. And those are your two choices, a nationalist versus a socialist. I can't stop Donald Trump now. He's not, you can't beat him in a primary. We tried that 4 years ago. But what you can do is stop Bernie Sanders. There is a guy named Joe Biden, who I think is by far the most conservative, who has a chance to win. There's a thing called the Buckley Rule that Bill Buckley used to tell people to do. It was for a general election, admittedly. Vote for the most conservative candidate who had a chance to win. I actually think that today the most conservative candidate with a chance to win is Joe Biden.
So is this just your warm-up in voting Democrat? I mean, for the people watching, they're wondering, what are you doing in November?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Brooke, and I tell you, it's probably an unsatisfying answer for Democrats who are liking me today. I probably won't vote at all, and the reason is I actually view primaries differently, and some people will say this is inconsistent, but in my mind, what I did today was a vote of conscience to stop Bernie Sanders, a guy who has been an apologist for, communist, socialist regimes that committed atrocities, that had gulags, that committed human rights abuses. I'm helping stop Bernie Sanders today. That's different from voting in November
Matt,
for a Democrat who would advocate things that I don't agree with.
It is totally inconsistent. I mean, explain how you're able to then put aside your Republican values today, like, right to life, and vote for a Democrat in the primary, yet somehow that's okay with you on Super Tuesday, but you can't do that in the general election.
It's a tough one, Brooke. Admittedly, this is something I wrestled with. I really went back and forth. Is this the right thing for me to do? Am I meddling in their campaign, and if I vote in the primary, am I then compelled to vote in the general? I think today is about stopping Bernie Sanders, someone that I can sleep well tonight knowing that I tried to do that. In November, I don't view that as a lesser of two evils binary choice. I view my vote in November as an endorsement of somebody. And as somebody who's pro-life, I don't think I'm going to feel comfortable in November voting for Joe Biden, someone whose administration would pursue an agenda that I don't agree with.
But given all of the articles, I just have to push you on this,
Okay.
all of the times we've talked on TV about how much you have criticized Donald Trump. If you sit out in November and let the other guys, sit at home and hope for the best, how can you still exercise your vote or your voice in speaking up and criticizing the president if you don't vote?
Well, luckily for me, I have a column, I have Twitter, I have my CNN appearances. But I get it. Most people don't have that, are sort of privileged to have that outlet. So it's a little bit unfair for me to say that, good for me, but not for thee. Look, this is just a really, really tough choice. I think that voting in November is more of an endorsement. I did not vote in 2016, and I continued to criticize Donald Trump when he deserved it for the last 4 years. That was a tough decision I made, but I decided I could not in good conscience vote for Hillary based on ideology, based on the fact that I profoundly disagree with her agenda philosophically.
I got you.
But I couldn't vote for Trump because of character and a lot of other stuff.
Okay, well, congratulations today. I say that in jest, Matt Lewis. It's a totally interesting position you're in, and I'm sure it was. Matt Lewis, always appreciate hearing your perspective and your side of things. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. In this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of different subjects, things that have been on my mind lately after seeing the results of South Carolina, of Super Tuesday and of Mini Tuesday. It kind of felt like walking into a fight with 3 or 4 people, and we just barely got out. We were limping out of that, and I was a little bit concerned. but I'm not quite as concerned as I was before, and I have a lot more optimism. And so I'm going to share why I have some of that optimism after we took such a slacking. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Joe Biden and his obvious cognitive decline. And I wanted to talk about what I feel is one of the biggest scams and hustles, which is being foisted upon the Democratic electorate. Vote blue no matter who. I know that that's going to get a little bit of pushback, and that's going to get some people who are not going to be entirely happy about it, but it's something that I need to talk about for the other issue that's been rolling around in my mind. And for those of you guys who follow me on Twitter, you definitely know where I stand on this. That issue is Dem Exit 2020. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Dem Exit, in 2016, a lot of people who are very upset with what happened in the 2016 primary between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, there was a movement that was created called Dem Exit. And plenty of people who either came into the Democratic Party to vote for Bernie Sanders or were a part of the Democratic Party were upset, and they decided, we are going to leave the party. Well, those people were blamed for it and demonized and all that, but it's back again. And we're going to talk about it. So without further ado, we're going to get into the video. Hope you guys enjoy. Please, if you enjoy this comment, please subscribe. Please tap the bell so you get my videos as soon as they pop up. And if there's anything that you agree with that I say, that you disagree with what I say, or some strategies or ideas that you feel like I should think about or possibly implement in some of my theories and strategies on how I see some of these things, please let me have it. Just be direct and, don't worry about hurting the feelings. Without further ado, let's get on to the video. Thank you for joining me. Hello, and thank you for joining me. I guess first we'll get started with talking about Joseph Biden. If you guys have already seen my other videos, which I have posted before these, you guys know the race has definitely come down to basically a two-person race with Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders ended up being the nominee. Though we have other people who are still in the race, they are not actually very viable at this point. So I'm only going to speak about Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Now, I have done multiple videos on Joe Biden already. And some of those videos I lightly talked about what I see as cognitive decline with a former vice president. But I mostly talked about his history and some of his policies and things which I feel are indicators of how he will govern if he wants to become president. With the debate that's coming up tomorrow, we're down to either making Joe Biden the nominee or Bernie Sanders. As the polling has showed, as far as the issues, Bernie Sanders' issues are winning. The poll numbers have showed that majority of the American people support the policies which Bernie Sanders is pushing. The problem is corporate media has spent so much time saying that Bernie cannot win. And they've spent a lot of time on the other side saying Biden is the most electable. Now, as the cycles went on and they went from different candidate to different candidate, they felt a little bit more open to discussing some of the problems which many of us were seeing with the former vice president. This, I feel, segues into, and I guess is all mixed into the whole vote blue no matter who narrative. So I will talk about all of this, I guess, combined together. The vote blue no matter who people. Many of these people are definitely benign. They are honest people, honest and sincere people who truly are distraught and upset and are tired of this president. Many are not engaged in politics and haven't been engaged in politics. And this is their first real entree into really following politics. So their angst, of course, is at the president. And so many of those people don't know all of these inner workings and all of the sneakiness and all the games that go on between the Democratic establishment and between voters. So a lot of these vote blue no matter who people are genuine actors. The problem is many are being deceived, and they're being basically, their energy is being used to corral behind whichever candidate the establishment wants. And the whole reason and point of the vote blue no matter who is because from day one, they were definitely planning on this not being, they planned on it not being Bernie. They knew Bernie was going to run again. That was no secret. Most people, especially in independent media, knew that Bernie was going to run again. I've spoke about it before, but there were literal meetings with Nancy Pelosi, with Chuck Schumer, with Mayor Pete, with the head of the Iowa Democratic Caucus, with members from the Nevada caucus, members from that Shadow app, which was responsible for the whole mess in Iowa, and they also were contracted to do Nevada also. There were a lot of stories, and I mean, this isn't just me finding this on the lefty side. A lot of these stories where we heard about Obama saying that he might step in and, kind of put his thumb on the scale from behind the scenes. These were articles I read from Politico. And if you read Politico, Politico and Washington Post, or not Washington Post, Washington Times, and New York Times, where I read a lot of this stuff from Obama insiders. And they were saying that they did not want the party being given to Bernie Sanders. So what I noticed in the media, one of the first people which they propped up was Beto O'Rourke, how they kept pushing Beto, are you going to run? And Beto did Vanity Fair, and he was on the cover at Time, I believe, and he went on Oprah, and she asked him if he's going to run, and all of that energy was to try to get a buzz behind these politicians, get their name out there, because one of the biggest things to get an elected president is name ID. People have to know who you are, and a lot of the electorate do not know who these politicians are. Even the most popular ones, which we believe everybody would know, a lot of them don't know who some of these people are, good or bad. And so when it comes down to voting, they've been immersed in all these other things, and then they're being forced to just, make a choice. So they don't have the time to sit back and know about, well, this meeting that happened with this person and this person's doing that. And this person has shifted money here, and this campaign has a back deal with this campaign. A lot of people are not following all those things, to the level that we are. And so I ask that we keep that in mind when we get frustrated when trying to talk and explain and deal with some of these things with some of these people, because they genuinely just don't know it. And some of us come across a little harsh, because we just assume, well, they have to know this and they're just a shill, or they're a liar, or they don't care, or whatever. We have to try to figure ways to have more patience and have these conversations. And it's going to take time to start to convert some of these people, but that's part of what we have to do. And so back on to what I was saying first, to start off with Beto O'Rourke. And then next thing you know, the next person that I remember pushed, I believe, was it Kamala next at that point? Kamala started to rise, and Kamala was being the person who they were looking at. And then when Kamala had her struggles after the debate with Tulsi, then you started to notice, well, Joe Biden started to creep back up to the top a little bit. And then he'd have a couple of gaffes, the record player comment, and, forgetting Obama's name and a couple of those things like that. He would drop back down in the polls just a tad bit. And then they would start propping the next candidate up. Elizabeth Warren, she had her stint where she was on top, and they were really pumping Elizabeth Warren. Once she tried to come out with her healthcare, her Medicare for All bill, which was very unsatisfactory to the moderates and to the left of the party, it kind of left her in no woman's land, in a sense. And that's when her campaign started to become very negative. If you'll notice, right after that time, that's when all of her attacks on Bernie Sanders began, right before Iowa, as she was slipping in the polls. As she continued to slip in the polls, then the next buzz that you heard about was, what about Mayor Pete? Mayor Pete he did well in Iowa. Mayor Pete, we have to watch out for Mayor Pete. And so as Mayor Pete, many people noted, he's doing terrible with African-American support. He's doing terrible with minority support across the board. And he's also doing terrible with the youth vote. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. And as you see, as he went on to the next states, he continually did worse and worse and worse. And then as he did worse, the very next state over, with Amy Klobuchar snagging a third place, she was, trailing the pack down at the bottom for the most part. Well, then the media start covering that. Is Amy about to have a surge? Is she going to have a surge? Well, what happened is, as they kept losing and kept putting people up, Bernie kept winning. As he started winning, and as the momentum started going that way, as you started to see people in the establishment even start to kind of bend the knee a little bit to Bernie and say, well, maybe he might be the nominee. Maybe he could be electable. Then you start having those questions of, would you vote for Bernie if he's the nominee? And you had people like Hillary Clinton, who came out and she was like, I don't know. She was very evasive on it. Then you had people like that Biden supporter, I can't remember her name, but she flat out said, no, I will not vote for Bernie if he's the nominee. I don't care. I won't do it. That told a lot of people like myself, who are a Bernie supporter or push for politics, who are even further to the left of Bernie. What we saw there is, and the way the media covered is, how do we stop Bernie? Stop Bernie, stop Bernie. Well, we look at it as, no other candidate is, they're having to stop Kamala. They're not having to stop Joe Biden. They're not having to stop anybody. Why are they treating Bernie in this way? Why is he the only candidate that gets this kind of scrutiny? They will constantly say, well, he hasn't been vetted. He hasn't been vetted. All the stuff which they're bringing up, where they brought up the whole Castro comment, they brought up, he voted for the crime bill too. All this stuff that they say he wasn't vetted on is all the same stuff which was brought out in 2016. The candidates which have not been vetted are all the moderate candidates. In independent media, everybody was talking about Kamala Harris's record while she was in California. It took all the way till the debate for Tulsi like 8 months later to say it before the media would actually look into it. The busing, segregation stuff, all of us know that, but it took for Kamala Harris to bring it up. Then they started to want to talk about it for a little bit. Mayor Pete, all his issues with the black community, him basically making people opt in as his supporters and they weren't, all those debacles, the police shooting, the firing of the police chief, a lot of those issues, we knew about them and we were hearing about them. I mean, especially if you follow, like, for instance, Jordan Sheridan with Status Quo. They did so many on the ground interviews, him, Jen Dice, Marcus Ely, and Ty. They were all on the ground and they were delivering amazing content from people in South Bend, Indiana, which were telling horrific stories of what it's like under Mayor Pete. But does any of that get on TV? No. I mean, Amy Klobuchar, the independent media were screaming about her record as, wait a minute, if Kamala's going to go, then Amy needs to go also because she's done the same thing. She has the same record. In fact, her whole career, how she got up to the top was built on basically a story, which is a lie, and a conviction which was forced on a young teenager. And she uses the victim as her shield. Oh, this girl, this young girl. Well, it was a young boy who you threw in prison to throw away the key, and he was innocent. Ooh, he's not a victim also? That's how I see that. Well, later on, eventually, the NAACP finally came out and started saying, well, she should drop out. The media gave a little bit of attention to it, but there's so much other stuff that they ignore. I mean, everybody, once Mayor Bloomberg got in the race, they start, oh, well, Mayor Bloomberg, until people start talking about stop and frisk. As he started getting pushback on that, then they, well, I don't know, we'll see. When the debate happened and Elizabeth Warren brought up a lot of the things, she hit him with the NDA stuff. Then, okay, well, maybe Bloomberg's not as electable as we thought before. But you had Cory Booker, who was in the race at the same time, who had the same kind of stop and frisk policies when he was mayor of Newark, New Jersey. I mean, but that's not going to be vetted. His ties to a lot of Wall Street. The fact that almost every candidate on that stage but Bernie Sanders has a tie to the health insurance or the oil industry is not talked about either. You know, while they all scream that, well, Medicare for all, it can't be done. Nobody asked about those connections. I mean, even Elizabeth Warren, her daughter, works on the board of a healthcare company, but that's not talked about at all. But it's Bernie who needs to be vetted. It's Bernie who's unelectable. It's always Bernie. And I'm just wondering at what point are we going to start waking up and seeing there's a reason why they're going after this man, and it's not electability. It is because the same people who he complains about that are the problem, these people are a part of that same problem. And as long as we watch them and give them credibility and don't question or push back these people, we're allowing for them to continue to marginalize the people who are trying to fight for us. And we're fighting against our own interests. They went through all those candidates, you know, Bloomberg, Amy. I mean, granted, Castro, they didn't have to vet him very hard because he didn't make it very far. But about him, while he was in the Obama administration, he was the HUD and housing secretary. I'm pretty sure there were plenty of problems that went on with housing under the Obama administration, but that wasn't talked about either. But they always talk about Bernie's the one who hasn't been vetted, and he's been running for president for like 6 years. But yeah, he hasn't been vetted. That's why I say the vote blue, no matter who, is a con. They propped up every single candidate but Bernie Sanders. They actually had meetings to try to stop Bernie Sanders. Then Nancy Pelosi and a lot of those same people who pushed this blue no matter who narrative, who, when you ask them, well, if it's Bernie, then they get a little, well, I don't know, but it's fine for every other single candidate. And what I believe this blue no matter who, what it's about is after the 2016 election, they were worried. Well, looking back at it and thinking about it for now, they're worried about those people who decided to either stay home, those people who decided to cross parties and vote for Trump out of a protest vote, or some who maybe actually like Trump also. The people who decided to vote third party and vote for, say, a Jill Stein, or do a write-in or leave it blank. When you start counting up the numbers of how many people that was, those were decisive in Hillary losing. And I believe some people in mainstream media are starting to wake up to that and realize this could happen again. But they forced this narrative, and they, for at least a good 4 years, put it in people's head that Bernie is toxic. Bernie just yells too much. Bernie is not going to do anything. Bernie couldn't get anything done. But none of these other candidates get that same kind of press or media. Even Hillary Clinton never got any of that. Hillary Clinton never properly got vetted. I mean, because of policies which she did, there are literal open market slavery in Libya. They don't talk about Honduras. They talked about Benghazi a lot, but Benghazi is silly. They talked about our emails a lot. That's silly. But there are real things which they could have brought up. Money ties, which she has actually gotten from Russians and other people herself, even though she screams everybody else is a Russian. There is documentation. There are receipts that you can see on her business dealings with Ukrainians and all kind of stuff. But it's always Bernie who's never vetted. It's always Bernie who's the issue. It's always Bernie who's going to be a problem. And because of that, because of watching this over and over and over, and the frustration that I have, I've decided, you know what? Those people who are on board for Dem Exit 2016, I'm on board this year for Dem Exit 2020, definitely. And not only am I on board for it, I am actively encouraging others. If the DNC wants to play these games, then we will play games right back with them, and they will learn to respect and value our vote. There's a little video which, you know what? Here, I'll splice this in right here.
It's from a 2006 documentary about Ralph Nader called An Unreasonable Man. And Lawrence O'Donnell has some advice for the left here that I think will surprise you if you've been watching cable news recently, because this is not what they're going to be saying today. But here's what Lawrence O'Donnell said in 2006.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them. If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party, because the left had nowhere to go.
Hopefully you guys, that video illuminated more my thoughts and what I'm thinking and where my frustration comes in. Right there, that video from Lawrence O'Donnell showed what I'm talking about. Himself saying that I didn't have to listen to the left, so I didn't listen to the left. Well, I think it's time we make you listen. All of you. If you're not worried about our issues, you're not worried about the policies which we need to help our lives and to help our families and to help our loved ones, then when you need our help to get Trump out of office, please don't look this way. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, you're making a calculation by choosing Joe Biden, who has showed that He's having mental decline. I mean, literally, I'm going through this right now with my grandmother, has this. Those of you say, well, how can you just self-diagnose somebody? One of the biggest and easiest signs to see with people with dementia is forgetting time, where they are. People try to say Joe Biden's having gaffes. It's not gaffes. It's not a gaffe. When you mix up, Xi Jinping with Deng Xiaoping, to us, that doesn't seem like, well, whatever, the names or whatever, that can mix together. No, Joe Biden had personal relationships and talked to these men a lot. Joe Biden knew the difference between them. What's happening is his brain is reverting back to who he dealt with at that time period. And then when he's seeing the reactions in the room, he's still cognizant enough to be able to catch himself and fix it. And we're giving him a pass on it. He's doing it over and over. He couldn't remember Obama's name. He called Cory Booker president. Now, some people took that as, oh, maybe he's saying, that Cory Booker could be president. No, I honestly think that for a moment, he really did mix him up with Obama. I mean, there was another one where he was talking about something with the UK. This was something that went on under Theresa May. He brought up Margaret Thatcher. That's also, like I said before, with the whole China reference. Those leaders were in power in the 90s. His mind is jumping back to the 90s repeatedly. This is not a gaffe. When he talked about, well, you know what, vote for me and I'm running for the Senate, and then he had to catch himself and actually, I don't even think he caught himself on that. I think he just said, yeah, I'm running for Senate. Vote for Joe Biden. He ran for Senate in the 90s. My grandmother, when her dementia manifests, she could be 8 years old, in her head for a time period, and then snap back out of and be able to have a conversation with us about what's going on. She can talk about, oh, well, I can tell that it's raining and things like that. And she can have a conversation. Oh, did you do something different? Like she might notice where you have facial hair and you didn't before. She might be able to pick up some of those things. But she's much further along than Joe Biden also. Joe Biden in these early stages is mixing up things, and it is only going to get worse. Another thing on top of it is once you add stress, it magnifies it and it speeds it up. I know that he's suffering from this, and most of you guys know this also. Now, granted, you're feeling like, well, maybe it doesn't matter because we just need to get rid of Trump. It does matter. It does matter. I mean, at some point, you do have to have a line which you draw. And I will not vote for somebody who is not mentally all together to be president, just like I would not vote for Donald Trump ever, because he is not mentally all together. I believe he's possibly maybe in the same shoes, but he's just not nearly as far along as Joe Biden. Now, you give him another 3-4 years, he's going to start sounding exactly like Joe Biden. But I don't want to take that risk. And some people, well, what kind of risk? Well, if his mind is jumping back to different time periods, what time period? He could jump back to the wrong time period and think something's going on and put us all at risk. I mean, you do realize this man lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. He could honestly think that, you know what, the Russians and Castro are about to attack and decide to nuke Cuba. I don't say that jokingly. I honestly fear that this man is not altogether enough to be able to tell the difference. And we should not be so foolish as to just randomly put this person in there. If Trump has to get back in there and all of this foolishness that he's doing, he has to be impeached again to try to remove him from office, I would far rather do that. far rather do that, because I believe that Trump is going to continuously do stuff where he's going to put himself in a situation to be re-impeached and actually removed this time. But we cannot just take the risk to throw Joe Biden just in there because we have fear. Another thing that I would say, another argument that I would say is, today I just randomly decided to do a poll because I was frustrated about things, and I've already declared I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden, period. I'm not voting for Trump, don't get me wrong. If I have to write in Bernie, if I have to vote Green Party, if I write in my own name or Mickey Mouse, it will not be Joe Biden. And so I wanted to know how many other people were feeling the way I was. And so my poll so far, I'm going to run it for 6 or 7 days. Well, I think I put for 7 days. So it'll go into probably Wednesday, Thursday, well after we're hearing most of the results of this next round of voting states coming up on Tuesday. I'm hoping that people who see this will get on Twitter. Maybe you're not on Twitter. Get on Twitter. Let your voice be heard on some of these things. Right now, I think it's roughly at about 5,500 votes so far. And right now, from last I saw, it's roughly at 58% saying that they will write in Bernie. About, let's see, what was that? Roughly 22% that are saying that they're going to stay home. Roughly about 6% are saying that they're going to vote for Trump. And roughly about the last remaining 15% that's saying that they will hold their nose and vote for Joe Biden. Granted, that's 5,000 people. And I imagine by this next Tuesday, it'll probably be higher at the rate which is going. I mean, who knows? Maybe 7,000, maybe 8,000, maybe even up to 10,000 by then. I mean, I can only, fingers crossed and hope that enough people make their voices heard, because my goal is some of these people who are just going to vote blue no matter who feel like, well, Bernie can't be elected. I want you to take that into consideration, that you will have to do it without this youth vote. These people that a lot of you guys call toxic, which I had to listen to mainstream media call us brown shirts and Nazis and all kind of crazy stuff. You're going to need those. You're going to need us out there. I mean, if this virus is able to wind down in time, you're going to need us out there knocking on doors. You're going to need us out there volunteering. And the way I see this math is, if you have vote blue no matter who, and they're serious about voting blue no matter who to get rid of Trump, if Bernie's the nominee, they will be there. If Bernie's the nominee, we will be there. Those are voters you can count on. That's a lot more reliable than hoping you get all the moderates you can get. You're hoping you can get all the independents you can get. You're hoping some of the disenchanted left and Bernie supporters will come over. That's a whole lot of hoping. And I'm just saying that let's just be smart and wise in this time period, and let's not take the gamble. I mean, we did this before. We did this with Mondale, taking the safe choice, and he lost. We did this before with Dukakis. We took the safe choice, and he lost. We've done this before with Al Gore. He was a safe choice, and we lost. We did this again with Kerry, and he lost. We did this again with Hillary Clinton in 2016, and she lost. And we're about to do this again with Joe Biden. Hillary only lost by roughly 44,000 votes in 3 states. I've literally heard easily tens of thousands of Bernie supporters randomly who said, no, I'm not voting for this man. Keep in mind those numbers. Hillary only really lost by 44,000 votes in a handful of states. I'll leave it there. I hope you guys have a good one. Please make sure to tune in for the debate tomorrow. Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders on stage for 2 hours. No audience, which I actually prefer no audience. I wish all the debates were that way. I feel like a lot of the audience noise sometimes can sway people in a direction. And so I feel like it should be left out, and then us at home, we decide. And I feel like that's a much better way to be able to see who's a more clear-cut winner. Hopefully you guys really, really, really pay attention to Joe Biden's, wherewithal, and think about what I've said here. Do you seriously want to put up a man who has shown that he is not all there? I mean, keep in mind, he had a double aneurysm back in '88. I mean, I know people are worried about Bernie's stents. Millions of people have stents. Yeah, you might have to. Okay, worst case scenario, Bernie could have more heart conditions, go back into the hospital, or, we're not going to even say the worst of the worst, but he could have complications. Yes, that's possible. But his mind is still together. And when you're the president, that's the most important part. It's not about it's not about running a track meet. That's not what we need the president to do. It's about your thinking, your decision, your strategies, what you're going to do. How are you going to navigate, this ship? And if you have somebody who is not mentally capable, the only thing that you actually need of them is not functioning properly. It just defies logic to me why anybody would give that person the kind of power that you're giving the president of the United States. I guess that's all I have to say on that. Hopefully the tide is turned and people will wake up and we don't go down this road of putting Joe Biden in and watching, the Demex versus the Vote Blue, no matter who, split apart. And I mean, even more dire warning, I honestly feel like if it goes the wrong negative way, we could actually be seeing, well, I guess it'd be positive in my opinion, but we could be seeing a possible third party. Now, for the Democratic Party, I would hope that they're not going to be this reckless and take for granted the actual future of the party over the needs and wants of the moment. But a lot of times arrogant people only learn by having to suffer. So I don't know what's going to happen, with the virus. Not sure how people are going to how it's going to work as far as people turning up to the polls. Not sure what the numbers are going to look like. I mean, I almost feel like you have to just toss all the polls out of the way, which have been taken, because there's going to be no real way to be able to assess this because of how many polls are going to be shut down, how many polling stations will be shut down, and how many who just might not come out of just a feeling that it's not safe. And then you don't know what that is. It going to be older voters who are going to show up more because studies are showing that they're less worried about it? Will you have younger voters not show up as much because they're worried that they might infect older people and harm them? Or will it go the opposite direction and older people feel they're more susceptible and not show up to the polls, and younger people feel they're less susceptible and go to the polls? I mean, we could go on and on and on, the different theories. I don't know, but, I guess we'll see soon enough.